Okay, welcome back everybody to another episode of the Bishy PE Podcast. We are now on episode number 24 and I'm absolutely buzzing, so delighted that our guest this week is former GB Scotland and Glasgow Rocks basketball captain Kieron Achara. Kieron, how are you doing, mate? And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited. I've actually went to the extent, came prepared, and I've got my basketball top on, and I'm ready to go here.
Oh, brilliant. I'm a runner now, so I've transitioned to running. So if you've got a wee running vest on there,
Mr. Johnson, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. What Mr. McHugh didn't tell you there, Kieron, is that's a first year vest he's got on. It's absolutely tiny. So that's why I've not got mine on for you, sorry. Apologise.
And we're also joined by active school sport captain and current S6 pupil, Katie Stansbury. Kate, how you doing, pal?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Never stop smiling, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, let's kick us off then, Kieran. I'm going to start us. We want to talk about your school time. How did you find your school career? Did you stay on 5th and 6th year? How did that come about? What happened?
Yeah, so I did stay on. I finished 6th year. I absolutely love school. Most of my friends dropped out at 16. I actually think I was the only one in my neighbourhood that actually stayed on at school.
Right, okay.
Out of the boys anyway. And I was very fortunate because my basketball kind of came into play when I was about 16, and I started finding out about scholarships. So I knew that in order to get a scholarship to the States, I would have needed to stay on at school. So yeah, I stayed on. I loved it. It was one of my chances to get. I was very sociable. So I was a prefect. I made myself the vice head boy because the head boy had too much responsibility. Yeah. So I went under so I could go to other proms and stuff at other schools, which was a real privilege. That was before social media, so getting to meet other people from other schools was a great thing. So yeah, I stayed on. I absolutely loved it.
Brilliant. Did you have any favourite subjects like that at school? Perhaps any role models?
Yeah, my favourite subject was modern studies. I loved modern studies. The teachers, there was Mr. McTaggart, Miss Coffey, and actually a rector used to take modern studies as well, Mr. Ingram. So I really loved it. And I think it was because I started learning about America as well and what was going on there, because I was obviously planning to go there at some point. So I really took to that, and obviously PE was my number one. And my PE teachers, I still actually talk to most of them to this day. So yeah, they were great influencers in my life, and I was very fortunate because Mrs. Morrison, she was my one of our PE teachers. She also had played basketball, and she was actually friends with my mum and played basketball with my mum at school. So she kind of encouraged me to kind of keep playing, even though I thought it was a girls' sport. I didn't want to get involved. I think just because my mum played, but I absolutely loved it, and very thankful for my time at school.
What would the teacher's perception of you be? What do you think? If you were asked the perception of you as?
It was funny because I got people were writing to me saying congratulations and stuff last week, and actually my old modern studies teacher had written and said it's so funny that we were always trying to get you to do your homework, and now all of a sudden you're doing all this great things and great achievements. So I thought I was a good student. I think I always did my homework. Well, I thought I did. I never thought I needed to be pushed, but I was quite challenging. I was always asking the questions why, which could probably get annoying to some people, but I'm just a very curious person. So when things were said, I always wanted to understand it and understand the reasons behind it. And I think sometimes not all the teachers could break down those reasons, so I was just seen as an annoyance. But yeah, I think that I had quite a good reputation within the school, and I was well received by both pupils and teachers.
Excellent. Katie, I think you'll get the next question.
Yeah. Could you tell us a wee bit about your journey and route into basketball?
Yeah, I mean, my journey was, I was just your average 6'10" black Scottish guy. And like I said, for me, my journey was quite unique in the sense that basketball, coming from Scotland, is not a sport that it was kind of palpable. There was not really a pathway there. Like, I didn't even really know about club basketball. I knew nothing about NBA or anything at the time. So I was kind of thrown into it through a sixth-year pupil who ended up taking the basketball team. So he asked me, I must have been at fourth year, third year, or end of third year, fourth year, just if I wanted to get involved in the school team. It's most likely because I was 6'4". But I decided to go along. It was fun. Like I said, I'd played it at PE. We won the Scottish Cup that year. And from there, everyone just took off. So all of a sudden, it was like Scottish trials, come along, play for this club. There's a camp in the States. I went to the camp in America. Was told about scholarships then, and my whole trajectory just completely changed. So it went from being just a hobby, having a laugh with my friends and stuff, to this is something I could actually pursue and make a career of. So it happened really, really fast. So I didn't really get time to kind of think about it. It just happened. And my advice to people was always about trying new things, but being open to. Everyone always talks about what they can't do. So straight away you'll say, "I can't do that." Well, actually, if you're willing to put a little bit of work in, you will improve. Mm-hmm. The speed of that progress, I can't tell you about, but you can get better at such things. And we talk about the growth mindset within schools all the time. I'm a firm believer in that, because if basketball should never have been my path. If I was such a novice to the game, but I started to see improvement after improvement after improvement, and with that built my confidence to the point that I really believed in myself that I could actually achieve something with the sport.
Okay.
When you were younger, did you have any part-time jobs, and did you feel that they helped you develop skills that have helped you in your professional career now?
I had a few. So I started, I had a paper run when I was younger. I delivered the milk. So I was a milk boy. And I, believe it or not, I worked in Burger King as well. So yeah, I did a few jobs. Do I think they helped me? I guess.
What was your discount in Burger King? What was it?
It was 30%.
30%?
But believe it or not, when I started working there, I was completely put off eating the burgers in Burger King. And I only worked in the back. I was too scared to be seen, because all my pals would have slagged me. But it was one of those things that, like, I talk about, looking at my life now, and it's hard to see how much it helped, and I guess you just live it. But to reflect back on it, it wholeheartedly helped me. Like time management from a young age. I had discipline, balancing your homework with your job, to get up early to before school. All these little things definitely helped me, because I look at the way I as I approach my life as an athlete. I had all these little soft skills earlier on in my days. I knew that hard work paid off. You know what I mean? I knew that I had to put the work in to get the rewards. So I think definitely having a job, balancing that with my schoolwork, it really, really helped.
Katie, how are you finding it working in farm foods and doing your schoolwork?
Yeah, I'm getting there. I just have to deal with it,
Deal with it.
Yeah.
Katie, what's your discount? Is it more than 30%?
15, not as good.
Times have changed. Burger King, now you're probably paying them.
Right, so on to me then, Mr. McHugh.
Yes.
Okay, so Kieron, you've spoken about your kind of school days, your early or your route into basketball. Could you tell us about your professional journey?
Yeah, so my professional journey, again, it came back to my last year in university. I was still undecided what I wanted to do, because my motivation to actually pursue basketball was more about the scholarship and getting a degree than it was about playing professional basketball. So I was doing really, really well in university. I was like student athlete of the year, I had a good grade point average. I was getting offered jobs in the States through the alumni and everything else. But then we were told that we were going to be the Olympic Games in 2012 in London. So I knew that it was a fair shot that GB would be competing. And I got invited to a camp for Great Britain my junior year, so my second last year in university. And I didn't make the team. The team was really, really good, but I was like, okay, I was on the cusp. So I was like, if I go professional and I have a professional career, I have a chance of making that team. If I didn't go professional, there was no chance. My basketball career was essentially over. Yeah. So I was, in my mind, I was like, you know what, let's take that chance. So I decided to get an agent. my last year, just after I'd finished university. Went to Chicago my first year, first summer to train, like trying to pursue a career, hopefully, get picked up for an NBA team, whatever. That didn't quite work out, and fortunately I'd signed a 3-year contract in Italy. So ended up, if you look at my career, I was in Italy most of my career, then moved to Spain, played in Greece, then Bulgaria, and then I moved back to sunny Scotland. So yeah, like I said, it was more me being a little bit more proactive with that, but the whole process of getting an agent, understanding European basketball, it was so alien to me. It was quite a tough challenge, because how do you go about selecting an agent? How do you trust someone to handle your contracts, everything else? But I think it worked out for me in the end.
And how did you find, the different cultures that you spoke about, so Italy, Spain? How did you find that you adapted to the different cultures?
You know what? I always said that I left home at 17. So just after my 6th year, I actually moved to Spain before I went over to the States.
Right.
And I struggled. I left after like 3 weeks. It was just too much for me, too fast, overwhelming. I was so homesick. So my path then changed. I moved to England, and then I moved to the States and everything. And no matter how long I was away from, I was always homesick. There was not one part of my career that I was like, I don't miss home.
Yeah.
But the one thing I learned to balance was, well, what are my goals? What am I trying to achieve? So once I started looking at what I wanted to achieve, now those people think we'd call them sacrifices. There weren't sacrifices anymore, because I knew in order to achieve my goals, I had to go through certain things. And that kind of kept me focused. But the one thing I think my first year in Italy, the mistake I made was I clung on to what I knew, what I was comfortable with. So my teammates, the ones who were American in essence, I would hang around with them more because they spoke English. I didn't want to go to my comfort zone. I would go to places that there was still English in the menus, or there was this, there was that, because that's what I was right in my comfort zone. But what then started to happen was, after my first year, I got thrown into a situation that not everyone did speak English. So I was essentially forced into learning some Italian, and I started to embrace the culture more. So what I did after every year when I joined a different team, the first thing I did for the first month or so, I would go for walks. I would learn to say hello, goodbye, thank you, just a little buzz phrases to kind of help you with the process. I would always make friends with the locals, just to try and embrace the culture. So once I started getting to that stage, I was really embracing different cultures. It made me feel, at home. Because I think when you compare and contrast, it's, when you have assumptions of what it should be like, you really struggle. But when you just embrace it for what it is, you start to enjoy it more. So that was one of the big lessons I've learned in my life. I genuinely believe I could move anywhere in the world right now and find a way to make it work.
And how did you find the standard of basketball? Was there big differences in terms of the different countries that you moved about from?
Massive. So the thing, to put it into perspective, moving from Scotland to Spain when I first tried to do that, I think the hardest thing was the adjustment to, like, in Scotland I trained like twice a week at the start, to then training twice a day. When I moved to America, like, I think in Scotland we're quite humble in the sense that, if your coach, your manager says, right, you're on the bench, you're a sub, like, you're just kind of like, okay, I'm the sub today. Well, in America, like, no, I'm not the sub. I'm not so you're every single day in the States, you were never comfortable, you were always competing. And I think that helped me with my confidence and to learn to compete a little bit more, because the Americans don't shy away from saying, I'm good at something. I come back to Scotland and I'm like, who's the best basketball player? And no one really, there's maybe two guys who are definitely not the best, they'll put their hand up. But the other ones are kind of like, they don't want to say it. I don't want to say I'm good at this or I'm good at that. In America, they want to tell you every single day, and they'll try and back it up. So that's where I really learned to say, you know what, I have to kind of stick up, believe a little bit more in myself and keep going. So America really showed me how to compete. But then when I moved to Europe, the technical side of the game, it was like, going back to university again, there was so much stuff about, the philosophy about the game, the spacing of the game, the flow of the game, that they don't have that in the UK at the moment. And in the UK, it's more of that kind of American mindset, just go out and compete bigger, harder, faster, stronger. But in Europe, there's like an art to it. You know what I mean? The spacing, the rhythm, the flow. I learned so much. But then I moved to Spain, which is probably seen as the second biggest league outside of the NBA. And that was just, like, again, a whole different level. So I was constantly learning. And again, talking about that embracing thing, I learned to embrace the learning. So I never got comfortable as a professional saying, right, I've made it, I've done this, I've done that. I never stopped learning. And actually, the end of my career, I decided to retire when I felt that I wasn't learning anything anymore. Like I didn't enjoy it anymore because I didn't feel like I was getting better. And I think in life you have to feel that you're progressing in some way to really get full fulfillment from that.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Remarkable message, yeah, totally agree with that. In terms of your career as a whole, Kieron, is there any particular highlights that you have?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Like I said, in hindsight, looking back at things, I now reflecting the whole journey. So I'm thinking, I'm just that wee guy from Braehead, a wee guy from Braehead in Stirling, and then all of a sudden I'm living in Italy, living here. Like if I thought of my life, it would have been grew up in Stirling. Maybe if I got lucky, I'd go to Stirling University, marry a girl from Stirling. You know, that was it. Now my life's completely different from what I expected. So I kind of like to look at the journey more than just the individual destinations. But yeah, definitely the highlights, I would have to say, obviously when you know, I had 105 caps for my country, GB. You know, I competed in the London 2012 Olympics. I captained my
experience like. What was that experience like? Your whole
you know, you hear it all the time. It sounds so cliche, but it's surreal. Like there's no way. Like I was a complete fanboy. Like I arrived at the village thinking, you know, I've made the team and stuff, but then you're seeing Mo Farah, Ryan Giggs, Andy Murray, and you become complete fanboy. You try and play it cool, like, oh, I don't want a photo or whatever, but then after a week, I'm getting my photos taken with everybody, going up, and then like I told you, I'm a curious person, so I'm asking them about their journeys. How did they get to where they are?
Yeah,
it was unique because there's not many. Andy Murray's probably a bad example of this, but speaking to like weightlifter Zoe, and I'm like, how do you get into weightlifting? Well, actually, I was at the gym one day and they asked me to try. So there was no kind of like, I want to do this. This is how I'm going to go. It was all like this, everyone's journey, you know. And that's another thing, another learning point for me, because I think when I was in school, I was so fixated on I should know what I want to do, and then I felt anxious about not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, instead of just kind of embracing getting comfortable with just learning and trying new things. And that's where I think from a young person's perspective, I want people to get to that. See if you're actually trying new things, but giving your best, you learn to learn. And that, I think that's the biggest skill you can learn, is actually how you learn. So listening, active listening, taking notes, trying again, all those little soft skills that we talk about, the resilience, all the rest of it, that doesn't happen without purpose. So I feel that all these little things that when I've spoken to athletes at the highest level, they all possess those things. And it's not by luck that happens. It's something that they've worked on and something they've experienced. But to get to that point, you have to say, you know what, I'm going to try this and I'm going to give my absolute best to that. And, you know, you can change your mind after 5 years, 10 years, 1 year, you know what I mean? But I think a lot of young people get so caught up and they need to know now what they're going to do, and that's the path they're going to go on. And I don't believe that one bit.
Any other particular highlights?
Other highlights, for me, graduating from uni was a big thing, first in my family, and basketball was the tool to do that. So that was a huge thing for me. Then I went on and got my master's as well, which was while I was still playing. So I kind of looked at that as for me, as a role model perspective, that you can balance both. And it was proving something to myself as well, because I think I always used to kind of, growing up where I grew up, it was kind of like, people who had degrees or this, they're a different type of person than me. Yeah. So it was kind of like proving to myself. But actually, once you get there, you realise that it is just a piece of paper. You know what I mean? That doesn't define you, but at the same time, I think it was quite an achievement for me personally to feel that, you know, I can actually do those things that maybe I wouldn't have believed when I was younger.
Yeah. Obviously, like anything along the line, there becomes some setbacks. You had any particular setbacks in your career, and perhaps?
I mean, I could highlight a few, but I guess the main one for me, and like I said, I was GB captain for 5 years, I think. I'm very proud of that. But the year before the Olympics, I was actually cut from the GB team, told I wasn't good enough. And, you know, everyone's like, oh, how, you know, you talk about the whole resilience thing, and I wasn't resilient in the slightest. I went home and cried to my mum. You know, I'm a grown man going home and crying to my mum because I've just been told that I wasn't good enough the year before the Olympics, which was my dream. So, you know, I learned so much from that experience. One, that my mum can slap really, really hard and tell me, you know, what I should be doing. But she told me to phone the coach up and ask him for some feedback on, you know, what can I do to get to that stage that I'm going to make the team. And that's probably something I wouldn't have done by myself. You know, so I always talk about, you know, when you're looking at the whole resilience factor and stuff, those positive role models in your life, that support system is so beneficial that you cannot achieve everything by yourself. You know, and then if anyone says I've done this all by myself and got to where I've got to by myself, they're lying. There's going to be some influencer support, you know, when you need it. And that's maybe not all, you know, my mum for one thing could be my best friend for another. So yeah, my mum helped me, you know, phoned the coach up, and that year I'd signed to go to Spain. So it was actually the highlight of my professional career, going to my biggest team, but at the same time I'm getting told from my national team. And I guess in the past, a lot of people would make excuses. The coach doesn't like me, you know, this, or that, you know. And I wanted to do that, don't get me wrong. My mum didn't allow me to do that. But his feedback was, well, the guys in your position, you need to kind of work on your game and extend it to 3-point range. So I always used to kind of play closer to the basket. But on the GB team, there was 5 other guys, bigger, stronger, faster than me. So developing my shot was a big thing, and that's not what defined me as a pro. You know, so when I went to Spain that year, I asked my coach, who was at the time, I was like, "Would you help me work on my 3-point shot?" And he said, "Well, before and after training sessions, I'm more than happy to do that." So the whole year I worked on that. And again, when I went to the trials the year after, in my mind now, I knew that even if I was to be released, I knew that my life still goes on. Yeah. Did that make sense? Mm-hmm. So there was no fear. I had no fear of failure anymore because I knew I'd given my absolute all. I put myself in the best position to succeed. And if it doesn't work out, I can still keep going, you know? So I think that added element of kind of, you know, less pressure, took the pressure off myself. I played outstanding. And I think that was the reason I made the team. And I like to tell that story because everyone knows me as the GB captain, but they don't know me as the GB guy who got kicked off the team and told he wasn't good enough and went crying to his mum, you know. And I think that is just as important as the success part, because without that part, there would never be success, you know. And I think a lot of people cut themselves short because they have a hurdle, they get told they're not good enough, they fail a test, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my life's over, I'm not good at this, I'm going to do something completely different. Well, actually, if it's your passion, your purpose, stick with it. You know what I mean? Who's that person to define you? You define you. So just keep going. So that's probably the biggest setback I've had within the sport. Other than, you know, I've had a few injuries and stuff too.
Yeah, I must be honest. I've been home and cried to my mum. I failed my minibus test 3 weeks ago, and I went home and cried to my mum.
There's always next year.
He never just failed it. He never failed it once, so Kieron, that's the only thing. Failed it a couple of times.
Just keep going. Keep going.
That's it. Mr.
Growth mindset, Mr. McHugh.
Or save up your money and get a chauffeur. That's another way you can.
So my next question, Kieron, is about any funny stories that you might have from your playing days.
Funny stories.
It could be about initiations, or it could be any funny stories maybe when you were on away trips.
See the initiation, so with the GB team, we have them sing national anthem in a restaurant. So anytime in a restaurant, all the new rookies have to sing national anthem. And it's funny because I can tell people now this, that I've retired. Everybody went through it, but I actually didn't.
Right.
So I just tell people, it's actually not a chance. Not a chance. But yeah, so that was something I really love to do. But we've had some really memorable renditions of God Save the Queen. But to be fair, half the teams not even knew the words. But yeah, a funny story I guess would be when I was playing in Bulgaria, and I was in training before. We were actually in Israel, but playing for a Bulgarian team, and we were just walking through a little drill. Guy came down, like jumped up for no reason, and came down and with his elbow in my tooth and knocked my tooth out. So I'm there with no tooth. So they rushed me to the emergency hospital, and the guy puts this wiring on stuff. He said, "Look, it's dead. The tooth's dead. You're going to have to get surgery, a replacement."
That must
I went back to Bulgaria.
That must have been a few years ago because your teeth are pearly whites. Just
well, that's what I'm saying. They're Bulgarian Veneers, the cheapest in the market. So I get back to Bulgaria, and they were saying that they could get a screw-in tooth, but I would miss like 3 weeks of the season or something. Or I could get like this bridge thing that made with veneers. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I'll go with the bridge thing because I couldn't miss 3 weeks. And so I go in for the surgery, and she shaves down my teeth and everything. And in Bulgaria, this means yes, and that means no.
All right.
So very, very confusing. So she shaves down my teeth, and she says to me, I'll come back in 2 weeks. And I was like, so I've got no teeth. They're all shaving down. And I'm like, this is it. And she's like, no. And I'm like, so what else are you going to do? And she's like, no, that's it. And I'm like, so I have to leave with no teeth. And so yeah, they just sent me home. So I'm sure up to training the next day, and I'm keeping my mouth closed. I smile at my teammates, and they just absolutely ripped into me. So 2 weeks, I was so down because I have no teeth. So my wife now, with my girlfriend at the time, I'm going on FaceTime. So she's back in Scotland. And I remember just seeing her face, and when I came on, I had no teeth. Like I thought she was going to dump me on the spot, but thankfully she stuck with me. So it wasn't just my beautiful looks that she's with me for. But yeah, that was quite a memorable experience. That I understood that Bulgaria was one of the cheapest places to get veneers, good quality, but the service is it's ridiculous. But 2 weeks with no teeth, just kicking around Bulgaria, trying to play games. It was just, it was a scary thing. But yeah, they've done a good job. I'm happy with them now.
They look good now.
Brilliant.
Tell me, okay, my next question is about leadership then. So you played a huge part of your career as a captain. So what do you feel makes an effective leader?
So yeah, I think there needs to be a desire there. There's a big thing I always try and teach people first and foremost, because everyone gets so obsessed with leadership, but no one ever thinks about followership, right? You cannot be a good leader without having good followers. And what I say by that is, kind of going back to that whole learning thing about the active listening, the be able to understand other people. It's a dyadic relationship. There has to be a flow to that. So you could say, I want to be a leader, I want to be a leader, I want to be a leader, but if no one's willing to follow you, right? And then at the same time, you have to have good followers. So I always believed that I was a good follower. I learned to listen to people. I took instructions really well. I challenged in a way that was, for the benefit of the greater good. I was, like I said, I was always a curious person, but it was never about my own, what was best for me. It was always what I was thinking was best for the team. So I think that transformation then came to authentic. I became a leader because of my authenticity and my willingness to do what's best for the team. And I think that whole thing improves when you just genuinely care about people. So I think that people can be in leadership roles, and they can, you have these dominant leaders who can have success earlier on, but people will quickly find out. So to be a sustainable leader, I think you have to just genuinely just care about your people and the people that you're representing and your team and everything else that goes along with that. So I think that one of the big things I talk about is emotional intelligence and learning to empathise. So I'll give you an example of that. Say there's a player who I think is lazy, and I'm getting on his case because he's lazy. So now I'm in a foreign country and I think this player is a lazy player. Shows up to training, he's a little bit late, a little bit lethargic. Then you find out after a couple of questions that he's homesick. He doesn't like the food in that country. He hasn't been eating. So now that lazy person's now turned into someone who's just homesick, who's not getting the right nutrition. So now you make an order for them from a supermarket, Spanish supermarket. You get them the food that they actually enjoy, and now they've taken their training sessions to a whole different level. So what I'm saying is that I learned to empathise and understand, and the best way to do that is communicate, ask questions, and just genuinely care about people, because I think we're very quick to judge people, and I think in Scotland especially we're very good at labelling people. He's good, he's bad, he's lazy, he's this. Well, I don't believe people are good or bad. They can do good things or they can do bad things, but inherently they're not a good person or a bad person. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think once I've started to drop those kind of labels and kind of reach a little bit deeper, I think that helped with my leadership.
A huge part of it is relationships, like you say, isn't it?
Yeah, trust is key, but it's very hard to gain trust when people have been burned so many times. So like I said, I just try to stay true to myself, true to my values, and at the same time, there is challenge. There is conflict. 100%. I think conflict is healthy, but I do it in a way that's respectful, and at the same time, I'm kind of showing where my point is coming from. So I think that the more authentic you can become, the easier it becomes, because a lot of people try and play mind games and this, that, and the next thing. I just don't think. I think that doesn't work, because if you're not true to yourself, people are never going to see you for who you really are.
Excellent. Katie, back to you.
You have a profile away from the court for promoting issues of equality and diversity. Is this something you've experienced yourself, and what more can be done in the sporting and cultural aspect to improve these issues?
Yeah, I mean, have I experienced, I guess, racism? I have in my career. So when I was playing in Greece, for example, I had one instance with fans were making monkey noises during the game, and I actually lost. I got really, really angry, and I got subbed out of the game. And I remember apologising to my teammates for me losing my cool. And now, again, in hindsight, reflecting back on that, why was my team not protecting me? You know what I mean? Why was it me apologising for that? But when I was growing up in Scotland, I always talk about the player that I am now doesn't exist, because I think about my own circumstances. So my basketball coach used to drive me to training. Right, that wouldn't happen now because of safeguarding. Right, there was no £40 a month direct debit then. It was just, I had a tote sheet, and if you can get £3, you can. If you can't, then so be it. Playing for your country now in Scotland is about £950 a summer. Right, so that was something I would never have, been able to put that burden on my mum. So I think of those situations, and I think about me then. So when I talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not just a race thing for me, it's more of a socio-economic thing to me, because I believe that sport in schools is very well received and very well loved, but the jump from school sport to club sport is now lacking for a certain demographic of the population. Yeah. So that's something I'm really, really passionate about, because I think about how fortunate I have been and how privileged I've been with sport. I think there's so many more Scottish kids who have that opportunity, but it's been stripped away with all the barriers that exist so much. So I actually believe that there should be more investment into schools and the resources and strengthening school sport, because it's the most accessible. Instead of just, so if clubs were to kind of form within school and after school, and that's exactly how the American system works. Everything's done through education. And I think that pathway is the easiest pathway to kind of create, because it's the most accessible. The resources are there, and there's more time on task. So that's what I'm really passionate about, especially when it comes to inclusion. I look at the more socio-economic side of things and think to myself, I was staggered to see that 31% of Team GB athletes at Rio were privately school educated, when there's only 7% of the population that go to private schools. So it just shows you there, like there's a whole gap. And for a lot of kids from more working class backgrounds, sport used to be that outlet, that way out. It was palpable. It was something they could achieve. I think that's now been stripped away from them. So that's something I'm really, really passionate about and trying to kind of champion, to make sure that there's more opportunities created for people, especially from poorer backgrounds.
I think as well the current pandemic certainly does not help that at all either.
Not at all. Not at all.
It's a huge worry. It's a huge concern, certainly for myself and our school as well.
You had any word, Kieron? Have you had any word as to when basketball can start being played or trained again down at the kind of lower levels?
Not at all, and that's the thing, because I do a lot of work in England as well, so they're now getting back into the swing of things. Obviously, Scotland's completely different. With regards to the governing body, I think they're just kind of sitting tight. I know they've been championing and kind of going with that, but like I said, they really are. And that's another part that kind of scares me, because I've been in schools. See, schools that buy into sport, they succeed and they go to a different level. There's a lot of schools that see sport and physical activity as an afterthought. Well, actually, that's what I'm kind of seeing from government right now. It's more of an afterthought. These are the most important things. But then we talk about obesity, mental health, everything else, and they're like, okay, how do we solve this? But they're actually neglecting one of the main characters that could actually help improve all those things. So yeah, it kind of gets me a little bit worked up at times. Just kind of, obviously I'm biased, but at the same time I've seen the success of sport, especially in countries. I look at Spain, who are very much into sport. Australia was great to see how active they were. I just believe that we need to kind of push that and make sure we keep pushing that agenda. But to answer your question, I literally have no idea, but I've also been proud to see how people have been adapting. They've been using outdoor space a little bit more. They've been trying to find the ways. They've been creative on Zoom and everything else with that. So I believe that we are adaptable, but at the same time, I would love a little bit more support and a little bit more clarity from government.
Yeah, definitely.
Mr. Johnson?
Is that back to me? Yeah. Okay, so my next question is about the MBE that you've just recently received for services to community sport. How did that feel?
Be honest, I was completely shocked. Like, it was one of those things, like, I'm like, I know so many people who every day have been committing their lives to community sport, and they've not received a single reward or an award or anything like that. So I was kind of like, at first I was like, kind of felt kind of bad. Like, I shouldn't be receiving this. But then at the same time, I was like, wow, like, someone's clearly went out of their way. I know the process is quite grueling. There's meant to be like references, everything else. So that kind of made me feel good as well. Like, I'm actually doing something that's, that's making a difference, and people are actually recognising that. So I was definitely very conflicted, but at the same time, I'm like honoured and humbled. But I just think I wish that everybody who was in the sports and kind of volunteering and doing what they need to do were getting things like that and getting that recognition they deserve.
When's the big day, Kieron? Have you had any word? The big
Pardon?
Day? When's the big day?
Literally, I've had nothing. Like I said, I thought it was a scam at first when they sent me the email, but there's been no talk about receiving the medal a day. If wee Betty's going to come on Zoom with me or something, I've had absolutely nothing. So
make sure the teeth are in prime condition.
I might go fly back to Bulgaria and get a new set.
Brilliant. Okay, I can get the next question, pal.
What advice would you give to any young aspiring athletes or the youth of today?
You know what? I guess going back to that whole message of belief, I think that we have to spend more time, especially in Scotland. Like I said, a lot of my American friends did not have that issue, but that we do have a problem with confidence, belief. There's a lot of apathy exists. Like I was saying, they're using an example of if someone says he's not bad, that's like a compliment. You know what I mean? Like it's a scary thing that
Yeah.
So I said work on that belief, but the only way you can work on that belief is through hard work. So I always give the example of me studying for an exam, right? If I don't study, I'm probably going to be more anxious than I was when I did. But once you study more comfortable, more comfortable, more comfortable. You know, you've put the work in. Now you've kind of got to yourself to a point that you've got no excuses. So if you don't do well, it's not because you haven't put the work in. I think a lot of people would rather not put the work in and make the excuse, because if they fail, then they can at least say, "Oh, I didn't study." You know what I mean? That fear of failure actually stops people from even attempting to put everything into that, because they're so scared of that failure. But I'm saying if you forget about the failure part and start focusing on the belief part that I can achieve if I'm willing to put the work in, I think more people will have a lot more success in different areas in life. So I was saying that, you know, belief is not something that it's just given, it's earned. Put that work in and put yourself in a position that you say, you know what, I can do that. And I promise you, once you have success in one thing, so for me, I had success in basketball. Everything I've learned in that sport, I'm now trying to apply to life after sport. And I have a belief that in my mind that I can be successful in whatever I decide to do, because I've put the work in something else. I can apply it to anything. You know what I mean? So it's definitely, for me, it's that belief, working on that belief, making sure that you're continuously working, you're challenging yourself, and you're going for it, and not making any excuses.
Kieron, you're also quite prominent in social media in regards to raising awareness of the impact of mental health. What made that such an important topic for you?
Yeah, so my last year playing, no, I would never say I was depressed, because I never got to that level, but I wasn't me. I just wasn't enjoying it. So I was showing up for training sessions, and it was more of a chore. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'd never been at that stage in my life to that extent. So I was starting to I was just miserable with the game, with the pressure. I was starting to question my own abilities as a player, you know, as an older player, kind of thinking, seeing the online trolling and saying, people saying, "Oh, you didn't have a good game, I didn't this." But it's funny, because there maybe 30 people would say he had a great game, and there'd be that one comment, and it just stuck in your mind, and it's the only thing you could think about. So I decided to step away. I made the announcement that I was going to retire, and it was maybe December time, and this whole weight just came off my shoulders. Actually, the last 4 or 5 months of my season, it was probably the best I'd played in years. So I started to understand then that the power of the mind. And I was very fortunate. I went back to university, like I said, and I did my dissertation on the transition out of sport. And the thing for me was I got to interview other athletes. Yeah, so I just continue.
Yeah, batter on.
Yeah, so like I said, I went back and did my dissertation that was on athlete transition. So I got to interview other athletes who went through that process. And I always joke about it and say it wasn't like education for me, it was more therapy. Because actually hearing people who had went through those experiences, the lived experience of this, the how they felt, you know, how they were feeling just before retirement, what they're now doing now, it kind of just gave me hope that I could do something after the sport as well.
Yeah.
So right now I'm working for a company called Frog Systems. I'm actually trying to really push it within education, because I think it's a great tool, just actually hearing people talk about their lived experiences of different things, from self-harm to exam anxiety. All these things I think would be so powerful within schools. You know what I mean? So just hearing younger people share their stories, and actually here's the supports that are actually available to you. This is how I can signpost this. You know, there's this, because just understanding there's people out there who can actually help you going through certain things. Yeah. I think that's a really, really powerful tool. So that's why I'm so involved right now. It's because of my own experiences and where I believed I could have went if I wasn't fortunate enough. And like I said, it was very organic to actually be able to speak to the right people at the right times. And those right people it wasn't because I went out to achieve that. It's just because by pure coincidence it tied into my university work at the time. But it just showed me, wow, the power of that. And I just think that a lot of times in schools and stuff, we hear from experts. We hear from experts opposed to actually listening to people who have just went through certain things, and I think that resonates with people as well. So that's why I'm championing it right now. I'm doing a lot with athlete support with this, trying to create this platform for athletes to talk about certain things, from gambling addiction to transition out of sport to all different types of issues like sexuality, depression. Like, there's so many different facets in life that I think that people would be willing to share their stories and actually offer hope to others. So that's why I'm championing that at the moment.
Brilliant. Keeping yourself busy, Kieron. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so we'll get your finisher for today. We would like you to choose any 5 dinner guests, for dead or alive. Who would they be and why?
So I was thinking about this one, and I was going to say it would just have to be my family because they're in my bubble at the moment. No, but in all honesty, there's been so many different influential people that I'm so curious about. Like Nelson Mandela was a huge, inspiration to me. From a sporting perspective, Muhammad Ali was definitely someone I would have loved to. Kevin Bridges, I think he would lighten the mood a little bit. I think that he would be quite a cool person to kind of be around. Who else? Serena Williams is someone that I'm just like what she's achieved and her background as well. I think it's so interesting to me. Like, she's not your stereotypical tennis superstar. So I think that she would be great to have. And then finally, I don't even know. I'm going to have to go with a basketball person, won't I? I'm going to say, that's a tough one. You know what? Have you seen the Last Dance? I would have to say Scottie Pippen. Not Scott. No, I'm not even going to. I'm going with Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman, I think, would be a great dinner guest. A very unique kind of guy. He was actually meant to come to Glasgow and do a talk at the Emirates Arena, and we all had tickets for that, but he cancelled at the last second. I was gutted because I think he would have so many stories to tell. So that would be my 5. If you'd ask me that next week, I would have a complete different 5. But like I said, I'm such a curious person. I think I just find people interesting. I would even have you over for dinner with my Watsons.
I'll take one of the kids' high chairs. I'll find that. Yeah, that is us complete. Again, we can't thank you enough for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, and I hope to be in your school in the near future.
Absolutely. I need to mention before we finish, Katie, what's going on in this bedroom here, pal?
A kitchen.
Kitchen. We've got teacups. I don't know what else is going on in there.
Everything.
Mr. Johnson, thanks very much once again. You can catch the latest episode and others on our Twitter page at Bishy PE and on our YouTube channel. Take care, folks. Have a fantastic weekend. Cheers, guys. See you later.
Right, cheers.
Cheers again, Kieron. Bye-bye.